In Brazil, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva met with workers on Thursday to unify the agenda ahead of presidential elections. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin confirmed his intentions to reorient his energy exports and reduce the use of the dollar and the euro to cope with Western sanctions. The death toll from South Africa's flood climbed to 341 as helicopters found out across the southern city of Durban searching for survivors. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the TeleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Former President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, met with workers and representatives of the many unions in the city of Sao Paulo. During the meeting, workers presented an unified agenda where they proposed, among other points, a policy for revelation of the minimum wage, the application of the basic income program as a social right, and the implementation of strategies to create jobs. The Workers' Party approved this Wednesday the vice presidential candidacy of the former governor of Sao Paulo, Geraldo Alckmin, who will be Lula da Silva running mate in the October presidential elections. About this, the political organizations warned this year's elections are going to be confrontations between democracy and fascism. They added that later is presented by supporters of current President Jair Bolsonaro.
Of that country. How can we talk about sovereignty in a country that is the largest food producer in the world and we have 116 million people with some nutrition problem? How is it possible to talk about sovereignty when there are 19 million people going hungry? How is it possible to talk about sovereignty in a country that is the largest producer of animal protein in the world and people are left looking for chicken carcasses or meat bones in butcher shops to mix at night?
Lula da Silva, former Brazilian president and presidential candidate, also emphasized that during his government, it was demonstrated that the increase in salaries is not the cause of increasing inflation.
I am proud to tell you that it was thanks to you, to the labor unions, in a meeting we held in Brazil, that we started to increase wages every year. We factored in inflation and gave real salary increases every year according to the GDP growth. In this way, we proved that increasing the minimum wage did not necessarily mean increased inflation. We proved that increasing workers' wages did not cause inflation, because wages increased, production increased, wages increased, but also employment grew, and the production of consumer goods also grew. That is why we established the inflation target, and it was met for the whole time we governed this country.
For his part, vice presidential candidate Geraldo Alckmin said thanks to the working class, Brazil has a popular leader such as Lula da Silva.
Brazil is here, united in this serious moment in which we have a government that hates democracy, a government that admires the torture that makes the people suffer. It is in this moment of unemployment, of empty stomach, of inflation, of hunger, of death, with 662,000 dead, that Brazil is getting stronger. Today, in this historic meeting with the most important trade unions present, I want to tell you that I have come to contribute with my small and humble efforts, but with my heart and enthusiasm for the benefit of Brazil. Your struggle, the trade union struggle, gave Brazil the greatest popular leader of this country. Lula, Lula, long live Lula, long live the workers of Brazil.
Bolivia and Chile conclude their pleading before the International Court of Justice of The Hague for the dispute over the use of the Salala waters. On the previous days, the Bolivian side asked the court to declare the right to the canals on the Salala that are in its territory, the recognition of its sovereignty over the waters, and to carry out maintenance tasks. The Bolivian delegation also demanded that the organism declare the sovereignty of La Paz over the artificial flow of the waters of the Silala and recall that Chile has no acquired rights over this water flow. On the other hand, this Thursday, Chile is expected to close the second round with its oral arguments to respond to the counterclaims made by Bolivia. The agent of the plurinational state of Bolivia before the International Court of Justice, Roberto Calzadilla, made his statement at the conclusion of the oral arguments stated on the status and the use of waters of the Silala.
Today, April the 14th, concluded the stage of oral arguments in the lawsuit initiated by Chile on the status and use of the waters of Silala. We have clearly, completely, and supported our position. Bolivia has full rights over the waters of Silala. Bolivia also has rights over the improved flow products of the canalization that significantly increases the natural flow. Bolivia has the right to decide if it maintains the canalization to deliver this flow under an agreement or dismantle it in order to repair the environmental damage.
Ecuador's National Assembly will once again analyze the President's veto of the organic bill that guarantees the interruption of pregnancy for girls, adolescents, and women who were victims of rape. During the meeting, congressmen will have to reach a consensus after the Constitutional Court returned the text with partial objections. The law was sent by the Parliament to this judicial instance to determine if it was unconstitutional after President Guillermo Lasso made 63 observations to the initiative, of which 60 were linked to alleged illegal proposals. The project needs 70 votes in the National Assembly to accept the observations of the executive or 92 to ratify the original project. Among the points that generate more controversy is the maximum time to accept abortion in case of pregnancy following rapes. In Argentina, grain transporters continue to strike over the increase in diesel fuel prices after negotiations with the government failed. At the negotiating table, truck drivers were asking for an increase in grain freight rates and readjustment of unofficial diesel oil price. The union said government proposals were not sufficient, and in response they will continue with the strike. Several voices have emerged from the government in an attempt to solve this problem, spanning for 2 weeks already, which is big concern on the eve of this soybean and corn harvesting season, from those are the main sources of foreign currency for Argentina's economy. And we'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Of the dollar and the euro in order to face Western sanctions. During a meeting with his cabinet in Moscow, Putin indicated the government must prepare for the possible rejection of fuel and natural gas deliveries by the European countries. The president declared that the country's energy sector is suffering the consequences of Western sanctions and announced that the banks of the countries that support the sanctions against the nation are delaying payments for Russian suppliers. In view of the conflict, the leader warned that the Western intentions to replace Moscow in the energy market will affect the global economy and the very countries that participate in the replacement.
We need to diversify exports. We will proceed from the fact that in the foreseeable future, the supply of energy resources in the western direction will be reduced. Therefore, it is important to consolidate the trend of recent years, step by step shift the direction of our exports to the fast-growing markets of the South and East.
Russian Defense Minister revealed new data on more than 500 U.S. sponsors military biological pride in Ukraine and other countries. The Defense Ministry announced the names of those involved in the implementation of U.S. military biological programs. Authorities detailed that there are already testimonies about dangerous biological experiments conducted by the U.S. on patients of hospitals in Kharkov. At the same time, they indicated that the Technical Scientific Center of Ukraine can create an unfavorable biological environment in Moscow, Europe, the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov. During the period of 2014-2022, the Technical Scientific Center of Ukraine implemented more than 500 projects in such countries as Georgia, Moldova, and Azerbaijan. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed on Thursday that rejections imposed against the ministry Twitter account were unfounded. Twitter blocked the ministry's post about the death of civilians in the Kiev suburbs of Bucha. The Kremlin-backed media had announced that the published gruesome videos and photos about bodies in Bucha were an elaborated hoax.
Unfounded restrictions are being imposed on posts of our ministry and our overseas agencies on Twitter just because we tell the truth, because we match our words with facts. Obviously, we can't be forgiven for this. I want to stress that despite such a policy of Western services, we will keep using their opportunities in our information work, strictly within our legislative framework, of course. At the same time, it is obvious we can completely rely only on our domestic online platforms and communication and technological decisions.
Lithuania asked the G7 countries to suspend indefinitely the membership of Russia and Belarus from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that the government of Lithuania points out that the suspension will deprive Moscow and Minsk of the opportunity to enjoy the special rights of loans from the Monetary Fund. The document also stressed that although the World Bank has restricted its operation in Russia and Belarus since the beginning of the special operation in Ukraine, it is necessary to impose new restrictions on these two countries. Germany will experience sharp recession, losing about 220 billion euros in gross domestic products in this and next year if Russia suddenly halts its energy supplies to the country, said leading German economic institutes. In case the energy supply from Russia was suddenly cut off, Germany's economic growth this year will be no more than 1.9%, with the inflation rate shooting to 7.3%, said the forecast. Germany is the largest buyer of Russia's energy among the UN countries. Before the outbreak of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, about 50% of coal, 35% of oil, and 55% of natural gas consumed in Germany came from Russia. The German government said it plans to stop importing coal and oil from Russia by the end of this year, while gradually reducing imports of natural gas as it strives to reduce dependency of Russian energy. China rejected the unexpected visit by party's U.S. congressional delegation to Taiwan. The spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, Zhao Lijian, called on the members of Congress and all the politicians of the U.S. to respect the principle of one China as well as the sovereignty and integrity of the country. In this regard, the authorities of the Asian giant assured that they will take the necessary measures to respond to the meddling actions to the White House. On previous occasions, Beijing denounced that Washington is trying to destabilize China by using Taiwan as a tool.
China firmly opposes any form of official exchanges between the U.S. and Taiwan. The U.S. congressmen should abide by the One China principle pursued by the U.S. government. The U.S. side should follow the One China principle and the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, stop official contact with Taiwan, and avoid going further down the erroneous path. China will continue to take firm and strong measures to resolutely safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. On Thursday, the death toll from South Africa's flood climbed to 341 as helicopters find out across the southern city of Durban searching for survivors. With roads and bridges washed away by the rainfall, rescuers battle to deliver supplies across the city where some residents are without power or water since Monday. The air support was pulled from military and police helicopters, but also a fleet of volunteers, private contractors, and schools. The government said it not given any indications of how many people are missing. City officials predicted that the bill for damage will run into billions of rand.
But the devastation is quite vast. I mean, every single little stream or tributary turned out into a raging river. There's a lot of houses that have collapsed, a lot of buildings that have been washed away. The community is affected in a massive way. I think it's going to take, I've been working in search and rescue for almost 20 years. I am a Natal boy, so I'm from here, and this is the worst disaster that I've seen hit Natal in 20 years.
The death toll from landslides and flooding in Philippines triggered by tropical storm Maggie continue rising to 184 and 48 on Thursday. Official figures showed scores of people are still missing and feared dead after the strongest storm to strike the archipelago nation this year dumped away heavy rains over several days, forcing tens of thousands into evacuation centers. Most of those deaths were in Pilar, with at least 28 bodies brought by boats to a sandy lot near to municipal government building after roads leading to the settlement were cut off by landslides. But weather and thick mud had complicated retrieval efforts in Pilar, where the ground was unstable. Searchers were also campaigning the coastline after some bodies were swept kilometers away by the ocean currents. Kenya warns oil marketers in the country against attempts to sabotage its economy. This comes a day after the general manager of its Africa of French fuel suppliers, Ruiz, was expelled from the country's following days of fuel shortages that has created long lines of waiting at fuel service stations. Any entity that is not ready, that is not able, that is not willing to work within the framework of the law of Kenya is invited to vacate his market properly, said Monica Yuma, Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum, was at the press conference in Nairobi.
We have decided as government that this is not an acceptable situation, and that Kenyans should not be subjected to a situation that we are facing today. In fact, in my mind, this situation can only be equated to deliberate effort to sabotage this economy, which constitutes a capital crime in our statute books. One, that this government will not tolerate any entity or person that is causing distress, either by creating an artificial problem or stress. And any entity that is not ready, that is not able, that is not willing to work within the framework of the laws of Kenya is invited to vacate this market promptly.
Opposition politicians and human rights defenders on Thursday demanded the British government for striking a deal with Rwanda to send some asylum seekers to the African country. Media reports said the government's plan will see some single men who arrive in Britain from across the English Channel in small boats flowing 400 miles to Rwanda, while their asylum claims are being processed. Labour Party lawmaker Lucy Powell told Sky News that the British government's move was not about tackling the small boats issue, but rather an attempt to tackle the government's own sinking boat. Migrants have long used northern France as a launching point to reach Britain since the coronavirus pandemic shut down other routes in 2020. More than 28,000 people entered the UK on small boats last year, up from 8,500 in 2020. Thousands have died, including 27 people in November, capsizing of a single boat. Countries in North America and in Europe are grappling with the worst inflation in decades as global energy prices are hiking amid the ongoing crisis in Ukraine and Russia's special military operation. Contract prices for renewable energy soared 28.5% in North America and 27.5% in Europe in the past year, according to a new report published on Wednesday by Little Energy, the operator of the world's largest power purchase agreement marketplace. Energy prices in the first quarter alone grew by 9.7% in North America and 8.7% in Europe, the report said. According to the Reuters analysis, the economy, logistical and labor markets disrupted during the COVID-19 pandemic had worsened since the outbreak of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, reversing a decade of cost declines for green and renewable energy. Now, shifting topics, the World Health Organization reported that the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths in Africa fell to its lowest level since the start of the pandemic. Health authorities indicated that infections fell by at least 37%, while deaths declined to 239 in the last week, according to a report by the World Health Organization, who noted that any country in the African region currently registered an increase in COVID-19 cases, according to reports from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention in Africa. The continued report more than 11,369,000 cases in approximately 251,000 deaths from the disease since the beginning of the confinement. And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. From TeleSUR English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.